Next is Tara. Tara Morrison from the University of Highlands and Islands, and Tara has been doing some research about the sort of social benefits of good connectivity. Tara, you're very welcome. You have a presentation, which I will now run through the mastery of technology.
You're going to be pressing buttons wildly, I'm afraid. Sorry, there's quite a lot of slides here. I got this idea from a conference I was at in that I can't remember, it's a Japanese principle of 2020. You try to do 20 slides in 20 minutes or 20 seconds, but don't worry, it's not going to be quite that fast. But what I'm here today really, okay, I'll put it in context. I grew up in urban areas. I grew up in Southampton and Birmingham. My father's from Scotland, my mother's from Wales. And I've lived in the Highlands now for 10 years with my husband and children. And I think, so I've got the experience of both sides. I know about the urban, I know what it feels like to be in an urban area, and I know what it feels like to be in a rural area. And I sometimes think that I've become a little bit of a champion for the rural area, and almost sort of, I feel today that I'm here representing the 16%. You know, that are not necessarily going to be dealt with immediately. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm going to give you the Highland perspective, really, living it, and also in terms of the research that I'm doing. And there's three areas, really, that I've been looking at in terms of research, is to find out what's going on in particular areas of the Highlands in terms of connectivity. Secondly, when people do have connectivity, are they using it? And how they're using it, and thirdly, then how we can get them to engage better with that. Great quote that I found in the report was this idea of coverage, and Matthew made the point that, you know, it's really important that we take this into account when we think about the reasons why certain areas are not served by the market. And I think that that's very true. And I think that certainly my experience of living in a rural community is we're really resourceful, you know, is we find ways round because we have to, because there aren't necessarily the resources readily available to us. Having said that, though, increasingly, it's becoming more and more difficult to feel as engaged with what's going on globally when the technology is moving so fast and we're possibly being left behind. So a reason I like this quote is because of the next few slides is that the Highlands is it, basically, in terms of the problems that we've got. This is just a half map of the Scotland at night, basically, to just show you where the population density is. If you notice there, then, that the average is 0.32 number of dwellings per hectare. In the Highlands, it's 0.04. Okay, and that sort of black area here is the big problem in terms of the 16%. I don't want to, I might have misinformed you earlier. I don't have a map, as it were, of the sort of fibre backbone as it's, but in terms of, you were asking the question, where are the 16%? There, you know, where it's dark, basically, okay? And I've got a few more slides which sort of illustrate that as well. The other problem as well, though, is that also in the report, it was illustrated that the younger and more affluent a population is, then the probability of good coverage. Here's what's going on in Scotland: 46% of the population are between 16 and 49, but specifically in the Highlands, that's only 32.9. So it's another reason why coverage, again, might be particularly lower. We have an older population. And certainly the research that I'm doing currently in Sutherland, which is a rather large area of the Highlands, and certainly all remote rural as categorised by the Scottish Government, it is particularly an ageing population, and that has issues in itself, and I'll come back to that in a while. So then we have the topography, okay? So this is also then the problem of actually getting the infrastructure in place, is that if you notice that the large swathes of the Highlands are 1,000 metres above sea level, okay? So this is the problem that you're facing in terms of getting infrastructure here, is that you can't actually, or find it very difficult to access these areas. So it is another reason why coverage is particularly poor. Then if we look at the issue of rurality, we can see exactly what we're talking about here, is that so much of the Highlands is what we count as remote rural. That's a population less than 3,000 and over a 30-minute drive from a population size of 10,000, okay? So that's what you're dealing with here in terms of these. That's where the 16% are in the remote rural areas around that you can see that are all the sort of the yellow area there. And if you move on to the next slide, you see, da-da, that'll explain the broadband availability, okay? So the point of the previous slides was to just basically make it clear to you why we've got this problem, okay? It's nothing, you know, it's not rocket science, okay? When you put all of these reasons together, there are quite justifiable reasons why broadband is not in the Highlands, or is as good in the Highlands as it should be. However, what I would suggest is that it needs to be here. That's my message today, okay? And that's what I'm going, and more so than in urban areas, I would argue. And therefore, that's the reason I've showed you these slides, is that, yes, okay, there are these very legitimate reasons for why the 16% currently aren't getting it. But my hope is that possibly it's going to get better. Well, I'm slightly worried by this, is that I picked up this report, Point Topic, just the other day, actually, and I can still see that by the end of 2017, only 63% of the Highlands are going to have, you know, next generation. Now, they did. I know Lorne was saying by 2020 that hopefully, you know, that only something like 1.5% of the population will be left without. My argument would be that that figure, I know, is a small figure, but it's an incredibly important number of people who need it, and an incredibly important part of what the Highlands is. And I'll explain a bit more about that as we're going through. Done to death. You know the reasons why high-speed broadband is important, okay? The reason I've included this slide is because it's not only just supported by, you know, the sort of studies that have been done, but academically, there's quite a lot of research that's been done around the world to indicate the sort of impacts that it has. And the studies that have been done have been really, really good to actually show the various impacts. And it's not just economic growth. And to be honest, economic growth is an interesting one, because what seems to be the case is that there are really conflicting figures about the impact of high-speed broadband on economic growth, from anything from 0.5% to 2% GDP increase. But what's interesting is actually the research now suggests that there's a plateau, that there is a point where broadband actually stops, you know, actually being a key factor in economic growth. It does plateau out eventually. But the issue being is those areas where they don't have high-speed broadband find that they are just dropping lower and lower, and that's the problem, that's the issue. So this has all been done to death or whatever. What I specifically want to focus on, and that's general, that's not specific. I want to take it to the rural level now. So the importance in rural areas, my argument would be, is greater than it is in urban areas, because it's so much more essential to living a life that allows people to do all the things that they need to do in the 21st century and live in a rural area. Now, I'm not suggesting that people in rural areas don't compromise. They do understand that they live somewhere that means that they might have to compromise on their services. You know, you accept things that are a bit slower. You accept that there are certain things that might not happen as quickly. You don't have things on your doorstep. And it's the compromise that people make in urban communities. You know, there'll be issues of, you know, higher crime levels, of pollution, of noise, etc., or whatever. We all compromise on where we're living, but my argument would be that there are some key reasons why we should make sure that, in particular, rural areas are served as well as urban areas in terms of high-speed broadband. Right. I'm just going to take a couple of pieces of, two little pieces of research very, very quickly, just to show you the difference possibly, or the way in which people use the internet, both urban and rural, just to show a comparison. I just want you to, I mean, don't take too much note, you don't have to read this in too much detail, but basically it's to give you an idea of the key reasons. And this was taken from the Carnegie UK Trust survey that was done in Glasgow very recently, in fact, just for some of the key reasons why people in urban areas, from the study that they did, access they go online. Okay, so the first one is obviously things that interest me, keeping in touch with friends and family, using it for work, etc., down to things like getting better deals and helping children with their homework. Let's compare this to rural, and this is a questionnaire that I've done. Now, I'll be honest with you, I haven't used exactly the same questions for the survey, but just to give you some idea of the sorts of things, the key areas are finding out about things. Great. People in urban areas, that's a key factor for them. Shopping, 100% of the people that I surveyed said that shopping, getting better deals online, was a key thing that they needed to go on the internet for. And then keeping in touch with family, but also accessing educational opportunities. And using the resources, things like legal documents, etc. The research that I did on Butte, and I'll come back to this in a minute, also farming communities. They have to fill everything through online, through DEFRA now. It has to be done. Lambs, skipping about the fields, they've all got to have passports, okay? And they have to be done online. I know that there were people in Butte who were having to do that at 3 o'clock in the morning because that was the only time that there wasn't too much traffic on the internet, so they could actually get through the process without it shutting them out. Let's compare the two then. Okay, so this is me just sort of like taking just a block of the key areas, really, just to try and compare what's going on in terms. And consistently, apart from social media, the rural survey shows that people have a greater need or a greater want of certain services, particularly shopping, education, work is quite significant, keeping in touch, obviously, particularly when you do live in a remote area, and sourcing information which is very close. So what this suggests then is that people in rural areas actually want and gain more from the internet than possibly people in urban areas. I'm not saying that that's, you know, that it's conclusive at all, but certainly in terms of the initial research that's been done. And what we find then is that, certainly from the quotes that I took from the study that I've done so far, is that people aren't necessarily getting the service that they would like. Okay, sorry, it's quite a large quote, but the essential is that this is quite a typical response. It's quite emotive in that people get cross, they get angry when they can't. You know yourself, if you get shut out of the system or you can't access stuff, we want things quickly. We're being asked to do this stuff online and we can't do it. And I think that's a key issue as well here, is the fact that what we're being told is we have to go online. All our services are going online. We need to be there. Well, where are we going to get the infrastructure that allows us to do that, okay? So moving on. Another quote in terms of, you know, it's changed the way we live our lives. Absolutely, we know that. There's nothing new there. But it's The issue being is reliability. It's impossible to do the work expected of me due to the connection speed and the capacity at work. So the issue then being is that speed. Speed is a key problem. And that has come out again and again. And I go back to this issue of the 2 megabits per second, okay? Is that I live 2.5 miles from my cabinet, okay? So whatever happens, I'm really only going to get 2 megabits. I actually get, we average about 2.5 actually now, which just comes a bit of a shock. It means that we can stream films just as long as no one's got anything else switched on in the house. But it's the issue being here is that when they talk about ubiquity and that we will everyone will have 2 megabits, is 2 megabits going to do it? Is 2 megabits going to be enough to provide all the things that we're being asked to do online? The frustration that you have when you're trying to load things and actually use the facilities that are available to you, and as they increase, it's only going to get worse. Is that actually going to solve the problem? And what worries me is looking, you know, is the top speed. Is that the reality is that for again, this is from this Point Topic survey. It's not surprising when you see the sorts of figures that we're dealing with here. Is that what we're seeing here is that figures for Highland compared to the UK are so much lower. And that is a frustration for people in terms of trying to live their lives and do the things that they're trying to do. Okay, what I'm going to do finally is just look very quickly. I did a survey on Butte, which I've done this questionnaire, but this was a far more qualitative study, and it was done by actually questioning people and getting their perspective on the impact of bringing white space, which you'll notice is the sort of banner that I'm using. I'm actually funded through the Centre for White Space Communication for my PhD. And this is the reason that I was funded was because they had a trial on Butte to trial white space, and they were looking obviously at the technological side of it. I was looking at the social side of it. Okay, so this just shows you roughly where they are, and basically done through microwave dish coming from the mainland over to a transmitter, then to aerials on people's houses. And here, I went and interviewed, there were only 8 people involved in this trial who are actually panic-stricken that their broadband will be taken away from them because the trial has actually finished now. They do still have broadband, but no one's entirely sure who's taking care of it. If it goes wrong, no one really knows what's going to happen. But basically, this just gives you some really specific ways in which people are affected and need broadband, okay? So, for example, things like inland revenue, you know, being able to do the PAYE, the issue of tourism was massive. And this is what annoys me actually in some ways, is that, you know, those beautiful remote areas, that black area that we showed, that I showed right at the start, that's where people want to come. That's where people want to come to the Highlands. That's what they want to see. They want to experience those, but they still want the mod cons. They still want to know they can get connected, as Lorne said. You know, people come in to Thurso and they want to experience the Highlands, but they do still want to access their emails. And so if you're missing a trick here in terms of tourism, etc., if you're not making sure that those areas are actually supplied, it's a vital, vital part of our economic environment in Scotland. And to not have access is going to be increasingly difficult. It's also in terms of people moving into the area. And I think that that's a real issue here, is that what I suppose I do count myself as an incomer, although my husband's a local, he's from Tain. And they're increasingly looking at, you know, more and more people are looking to move out of urban areas into rural communities. But, you know, oddly, they think they'll get broadband when they come here. And they rightly should. And it will have an effect on the economy if we're not able to make sure that we supply these people, particularly in an ageing population that the Highlands has, is we need to try to encourage more people to come in and set up businesses, etc. And the children to grow up here and have an education here, which they hopefully can do through UHI, etc., and keep these communities going. But increasingly, that won't happen if people, like this quote here, naively expected it to be here. And they arrived, and I haven't included the quote, but they said when they didn't have it until they became part of the trial, they said it was like having an arm missing. Someone this morning said on Radio 5 Live, could you do without Google for 24 hours? I don't know whether it's a Google challenge or something. And it was like, oh, you know, I'm sure I could, but, you know, just the idea that I might not be able to have it was actually worse than probably the reality. Right, okay, next slide. So these are just quotes from people, and I think just put into context what we're dealing with here. It's not just, it's about business, it's about living, it's about being able to do the things you need to do in today's society. And those people who are, in some ways, are not connected, they're disenfranchised in so many ways. Shopping, a big issue. In terms of what you were saying in terms of the fact that being able to get offers, the offers and whatever, saving money. Financially, it costs a fortune to live in rural areas because of the cost of petrol, paying extra for postage, etc. And then if you don't have the internet and you're not able to then secure some of these deals, it's just a hit that we just don't need economically. Okay, so then finally, just to say what it means to people. Best thing that was ever invented, without doubt, being able to stay in touch with my profoundly deaf sister. These are some of the personal examples of the impact that broadband has on people, okay, and the effect that it has. So therefore, in conclusion, and that's, rural locality does mean compromise. No one disputes that. We accept that there are certain things that might take a bit longer and, you know, might not happen as quickly as we would like, but I would argue that high-speed broadband in rural areas is more important than in urban ones, and we need to ensure that it happens. And I'm not talking today about the ways in which it should happen, and I agree that it needs to be about communities grasping the nettle themselves in moving forward, because otherwise I don't think they will be serviced. I think there needs to be more public support as well for that 1.5% that might not get it as well, because it's a utility. Increasingly, it has become a utility. And to not service these people, I think, is an injustice.